Well, thank you. I'm glad that I was able to follow Kim and relive both the challenges, the nightmare for about a week there as the polling numbers crawled and we were just sitting below 50%, to waking up one morning and suddenly it had flipped, and then actually every day it got just even a little bit stronger and got just enough. So very good stuff. But thank you all for inviting me. I'll take a little bit different tack than Kim did, but we certainly appreciate the League of Women Voters and all the members of the coalition and everybody who came together to make what everybody said, as you heard, impossible, possible. And I'm running again in 2024, so we'll see if in fact it was the third rail of public opinion. I know most of where I live voted heavily no on that. And I think, I'm going way off my script and my staff back there is freaking out. The classic thing is, if you looked at the polling, at the actual vote results in University City, most of you, I think, know University City. You have single-family homes south of Rose Canyon, and you have the condos and the apartments north. So you can imagine where the vote was. Heavily no for the single-family homes, and heavily yes on the apartments and the condos. And it really was that margin, despite all the incredible messaging, the incredible importance of why Measure B needed to happen in the city, what it really came down to was essentially pocketbooks. And you could not explain to people about how property tax really worked. I think that was one of my takeaways in that conversation, is how little people actually understand where property taxes fit and goes into a revenue source for our city. So now that I've gotten that out of the way. So I do represent District 1, which is kind of our northwest corner of our city, our coastal cities, from Pacific Beach up to La Jolla, Del Mar Heights, Carmel Valley, Pacific Highlands Ranch. I've really gotten stretched out in this last redistricting. And was mentioned, I now chair the city's Environment Committee, now for the second year, taking over when Council President Elo Rivera became Council President. And just last month, I was elected chair of the board of San Diego Community Power. So I can tell you, this kid who grew up in Allied Gardens, became a civil engineer, never imagined that I would become an environmental champion at the city of San Diego, but very proud by that honor. And there's a lot of good work we need to do. You're hearing about it all day long. It's so incredible important for today and for our future generations. And as I mentioned, I'm a civil engineer, so that gives me a little bit of a unique perspective in how I want to see the city operate, because at the end of the day, the talk is good, the passion is good, but until we actually embed it in what the city does, it doesn't really change what's happening. So that's what we need to be talking about. So from pipes to potholes, I look at the entire process through the lens as an engineer, ensuring we get the best product and services to San Diego. So for those of you who don't know, I actually started my career as a student engineer working in the Environmental Services Department, working at the Miramar landfill. And for those of you with longer memories, working at the Choyas landfill. So in the lifestyle, I was honored as a young kid to actually do the final grading plan for the closure of Choyas landfill. And I was so proud of that until I learned they added about another 30 feet on top of my grade plan, because we don't have a lot of landfills. It's almost impossible, or if not impossible, to get a new permit. So I have seen the trash literally up close and personal. And now that I'm, as a council member, I look at it, of course, with a slightly different lens, and have been privileged to work with our Environmental Services Department to get tours of all the fabulous facilities, meet all the great workers that do all that good work surrounding trash and recycling. Now, the other good thing is that I also get to hear and speak in front of a lot of audiences. And last December, I was honored to be the keynote speaker, at the Solid Waste Association of North America's annual conference, nationally known as WasteCon. Not as sexy as Comic-Con, but WasteCon it was. So was anybody here at WasteCon? Oh, so a couple of folks here. And what I learned from that, from the hundreds of waste professionals, directors, and executives they made it clear that San Diego knows what it's doing. And it was so important for me to hear that and to get that feedback. We have the direction, we have the leadership, and the commitment to move the needle towards zero waste. And the reasons vary for why we're so aggressive on achieving zero waste. For some, like me, and I think a lot of you in the audience today, and the reason we even have these symposiums, is because we must act immediately on climate change. There are altruistic reasons for the city to invest in organics processing and converting landfill methane to energy. Other reasons are more mandatory, right? We heard Kim talk a little bit about it, and I'm sure you've talked about it earlier today, that we must make changes because there's regulatory mandates from the state about how we will now live and change. Because as we've learned, people will not, on a large enough scale, actually fundamentally change how they live, work, and play. So government has to come in and do a little bit of that nudge. And we have to really change about the waste that we divert from our landfills, how we can deliver unused food to those who are hungry for it, and change San Diego's culture about how we look at our everyday kitchen scraps. And I think you probably have heard, as a quick aside, that San Diego's rolling out the green bins. How many have gotten green bins for the first time in the city of San Diego? Oh, only a couple? How many people live in the city of San Diego? Oh, so and you know we're rolling it out depending on which day your pickup is. I think I'm the fourth cycle in terms of where we live. My daughter has gotten hers, very excited about that. And it really is all about that hardworking staff at Environmental Services, as I mentioned. I don't know if anybody are still in the room. I don't see anybody from here. Renee Robertson, Matthew Cleary, Ken Prue, those people that are leading the Environmental Services. And I don't know if they're here, but if they can't, let's give them a round of applause because it's a big lift that they're making as all the environmental services in every agency are complying with 1383, and they're doing it every single day. Certainly, climate mitigation or regulatory pressure, the reason the city is so investing in the future of our waste is a bit of a combination of both those factors. It's simply because we must. We must answer for growing city with a shrinking landfill. We must eliminate methane, a super pollutant produced by the leftovers we have been casually throwing away in the past. We must innovate and convert our fleets to electric and maximize efficiencies in our routes. And finally, we must move beyond, as you heard, the antiquated laws of 1919. Is it really going to take 103 years to really change those laws? But Measure B did that. And I'm so proud to have worked with Council President Shawnilo Rivera in getting the measure on the ballot and convincing our reluctant council members that now is the time. As Kim said, midterm elections are a tough time to actually convince voters. But the good work of the League of Women Voters, all the coalition members you saw, the help of the Municipal Employees Association and the lift they did. You know, while Sean got to go out and talk to audiences that were receptive, I was the one that went out to the Lincoln Club and the Taxpayers Association to convince them this really was a very good idea. And while they gave me a lot of kudos for my arguments, it was like, yeah, no, we're never going to support this. It's a tax. That's all it is. No matter how you want to spin it, LaCava, it's just a tax. But we convinced the voters, and that was a really, really big change, a really important change. So, and as Kim mentioned, it really was about equity. That inequity about where you lived decided whether you were going to get trash collection at no additional cost or whether you had to pay extra because you lived in an apartment or you lived in condominium. The inequity of that was really that compelling case. Part of the reason I really judged that. And just to add a little anecdote to what Kim said about the Union Tribune, how they flip-flop, and actually the County Taxpayers Association also flip-flopped on their position going forward. But the biggest, heaviest lift that we made, and the only tiny bit of progress we made with the Union Tribune, was to stop calling it free pickup. It wasn't free, and it polarized the conversation even worse. And towards the end, through some good conversations, we got them to stop saying free trash pickup, because we all know one way or another it gets paid for. But that was such a frustrating experience with them, and it really wasn't even until the end that the Union Tribune started putting a little bit of our arguments in some of their articles. But it was clear that we needed to change. And as we're talking, San Diegans want more flexibility in the trash service. That was the one thing we did hear over and over again, even if people didn't like Measure B. They wanted those bulky item pickups, more frequent collections, And we've only been providing a service that is largely based on the needs of hog farmers. I think you've heard about the story of how the Measure People's Ordinance even came into place back in 1919. So now we have Measure B passed. So as was introduced, what are we going to do next? So Measure B gave us the ability to charge a fee for trash collection at single-family homes. It didn't mandate it. And that's one of the reasons, that was one of the other reasons that it was only a 50% vote that needed to pass. So what most of you are probably familiar with is that when you do impose a fee, that you do cost recovery, that there is another process that you have to go through. And that is the state's Proposition 218, to explain to people that you are only charging for what it costs you to deliver the service and not a penny more. And as I often mentioned, that cost becomes the ceiling, whereas a private hauler, a for-profit private hauler, they look at what it costs them to recover, and they figure out what the market will be, and then they figure out how much profit they can squeeze in, and it goes up from the cost to deliver the service. For the city, all we can do is charge what it would cost for us to provide the service, but we can actually charge less if we think it's really what's best for San Diegans. And we know that when we look across the cross-section of who San Diegans are and the income disparities, that we need to be very, very careful. Whereas I can look at this and say 20, 25 bucks a month, yeah, I can do that. It's an important part of who we are as a city. But for some families, that's a big financial hit. So we need to be very careful. The other thing that we'll be looking at besides the formalized 218 process is whether we can provide some sort of financial relief for those people that would be hard hit. Part of it is more of the pay-as-you-throw model. In other words, you get to be incentivized to actually reduce your waste stream. I remember at one point I had two 64-gallons trash cans at my house, and my mother had the 16-gallon, the smallest possible one. Obviously, we would want to charge her much less than they would charge me if I'm going to have two. By the way, I will get rid of one of those when they start doing the pay-as-you-throw because I don't really need it anymore. And ironically, and Kim talked a little bit about this, the idea of getting a replacement trash can for free was a powerful incentive to a lot of folks. They get irritated when they watch our trash trucks beat up their trash cans, and then we make them pay, about 75 bucks to get a replacement. So the idea that they would get free trash can replacement was actually a powerful incentive. So as you heard, we're now like every other city that has that ability to charge. I'm guessing for those of you that like timelines, probably 2024, maybe 2025, depending on how we see the economic cycles, what the numbers when we do the Prop 218 cost of service study goes forward will determine how we actually do that. And of course, in the meantime, we're really implementing the state mandates going forward. So I'm very proud of what we as a city has done. I'm very proud of the Environmental Services Department and how they're rolling out. It is a monumental job that they're doing in terms of rolling out the new trash cans to the hundreds of thousands of people who don't have green waste bins, making sure that we now switch to finding that weekly pickup instead of the bi-weekly pickup. We went through an incredible program to actually hire trash truck drivers because we were falling short, and now that we're having more trucks out there on the road. And fortunately, we got through the supply chain issues of getting more trucks so that we can actually do those weekly pickups. So with that, it's been an incredible effort. I always try to convince people when I ran for office that this is at the end of my career. I'm not worried about getting elected and going to higher office like a lot of my colleagues are. Fine for them. But it gives me the ability to really tackle some of these bigger issues that our city is facing, that people have been reluctant, that have been called the third rail. Let's take them on. Let's continue to work together in terms of that implementation, meet our very, very ambitious goals, and turn those goals into action and results. So thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.